The massive space station called Grand Exchange floated silently in space. Inside, it was anything but quiet. The halls were full of noise from thousands of alien species buying and selling things. Among all these creatures, 3 human teenagers walked through the crowded marketplace, their expensive clothes making them stand out from the crowd. Do-Young Park, a 17-year-old boy with perfectly styled black hair and the latest fashion from Earth, led his 2 friends through the market. He held up his holophone, filming everything for his millions of followers back on Earth. His friend Tae-ho Kim walked on his right, tall and thin, wearing a jacket that cost more than most people earned in a month. On his left walked Jae-yeon Lee, her long hair dyed with strands of silver that sparkled under the station's lights. "Welcome back to my channel, everyone." Do-Young spoke to his phone with practiced ease. "Today we're exploring the alien market on Grand Exchange Station. Dad finally let me use the family's private space yacht, so we're going shopping." "More like he got tired of you asking every day for 3 months," Jae-yeon said with a laugh. She ducked as a floating delivery drone whizzed past her head, carrying packages to somewhere else in the station. "Details, details." Do-Young waved his hand. "The important thing is we're here, and I promised my followers something special today." Tae-ho looked at his friend with worry. "Please tell me you're not planning anything crazy. Remember last time, when you tried to buy that alien pet and it turned out to be a baby space shark? That was different. How was I supposed to know it would grow to the size of a bus?" Do-Young defended himself. "Besides, Mom thought it was funny, after she finished yelling at me." The 3 friends passed by shops selling everything imaginable. There were stores with floating orbs of light that sang when touched, shops full of plants that changed color based on who looked at them, and even a place that claimed to sell bottled dreams. Do-Young's followers sent message after message, asking him to show them more of the strange and wonderful items. "Oh wait, look at that." Jae-yeon pointed to a shop with walls made of what looked like ice. Strange blue crystals glowed inside, and cold mist poured out of the open doorway. The sign above was written in several alien languages, with the English translation reading "Cathal's Rare Ice Treasures." "Perfect." Do-Young turned his phone toward the shop. "This looks interesting. Let's check it out." As they got closer, they could feel the cold air coming from the store. Their environmental suits, thin and fashionable but still highly advanced, automatically adjusted to keep them warm. The suits were required for all humans on the station, since different aliens needed different temperatures and air types to survive. Inside the shop, they found themselves surrounded by beautiful ice sculptures and crystals that seemed to have their own light inside them. Behind a counter made of some kind of clear material stood the shop owner. The alien was tall, with blue-gray skin that looked almost like ice itself. It had 4 eyes, all of them a deep purple color, and its body was covered in patterns that looked like snowflakes. "Welcome to my humble establishment," the alien said in perfect English. This was Cathal, a member of a species called the Shaqarians. They were famous across the galaxy for 2 things: being excellent at business and being able to live in extremely cold temperatures. "I am Cathal. Please be careful with the merchandise. These items are very valuable and very delicate." Do-Young kept his phone up, knowing his followers would love seeing a real Shaqarian. The alien species rarely left their home system, except for trade. "These are amazing. What's that one?" He pointed to a crystal that seemed to have a storm trapped inside it. "That," Cathal said with obvious pride, "is a Centaurian frost gem. It forms in the upper atmosphere of Alpha Centauri b, where temperatures drop to levels that would freeze your human blood solid. Very rare, very expensive." "How expensive?" Do-Young asked, already reaching for his quantum-encrypted credit line, a birthday gift from his father. Cathal made a sound that might have been a laugh. "More than a young human could afford, I assure you. This is not some toy or trinket for social media entertainment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop even more, but this time it wasn't from the environmental controls. Du Young's smile faded a little. His phone caught everything as Cathol continued speaking. I have watched many human younglings come into my shop, wanting to show off for their followers. They do not understand the true value of these treasures. These crystals are pieces of art that took centuries to form. They are not props for your entertainment feeds. Tae-ho touched Do Young's arm. Come on, let's go look at something else. There's that shop with the singing lights we passed earlier. But Du Young didn't move. His followers were sending hundreds of messages now, many of them angry at how Cathol was talking to him. The 17-year-old felt his face getting hot, despite the cold air around them. I understand value very well, Du Young said quietly. His father had always taught him that quiet words could be stronger than loud ones. My father is Hejun Park. Cathol's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Everyone in the galaxy knew that name. Hejun Park had revolutionized quantum computing, making faster-than-light communication possible. His company, Park Quantum Systems, was worth more than some entire planets. Ah, Cathol said, his tone changing slightly. The son of Hejun Park. I apologize if I seemed dismissive. Perhaps you would be interested in some of our more affordable pieces. We have some lovely ice sculptures from Europathat. Actually, Du Young interrupted, his smile returning but different now, more like the smile his father used in business meetings. I'm interested in something bigger. My followers deserve to see something really special today. Jae-yun recognized that look. Du Young, whatever you're thinking, maybe we should. How much? Du Young asked, looking directly at Cathol. For which piece? Cathol asked cautiously. No, Du Young said, his phone steady in his hand, broadcasting everything to his millions of followers. For the store, all of it. Every crystal, every sculpture, every display case. The whole thing. How much? The shop went completely quiet. Even the hum of the environmental systems seemed to pause. Cathol's 4 eyes widened so much they looked like purple moons. The entire store. Cathol's voice had lost its dismissive tone completely now. Young sir, while I appreciate your interest, this shop contains some of the rarest ice-based artifacts in this sector of the galaxy. The total value would be astronomical. I didn't ask if it was expensive, Du Young said, still smiling. I asked how much. Cathol moved his long fingers over a control panel, calculating quickly, including all inventory, equipment, and property rights to this retail space on the station. 15 million credits. Tae-ho made a choking sound. Jae-yun grabbed Du Young's arm. That's crazy. Du Young, don't even think about it. But Du Young was already holding up his quantum-encrypted credit stick. The small device contained direct access to his personal accounts. While his father made sure Du Young couldn't spend too much at once, 15 million credits was still within his limit. It was meant for emergencies or important investments, not impulse buying alien ice stores, but technically he could do it. Du Young, Jae-yun tried one more time. Your dad will kill you. Actually, Du Young said, his eyes locked with Cathol's 4 purple ones. I think he'll be proud. This is just like what he did when he was young. Someone told him he couldn't do something, that he didn't understand value. He held the credit stick higher. He proved them wrong. Now it's my turn. Cathol's face showed an emotion that was hard to read on a Shakarian. It might have been respect, or it might have been the alien equivalent of thinking someone was completely crazy. Very well, young sir. If you are serious, we can process the transaction right now. But I must warn you, as per station commerce laws, all sales are final. Perfect, Du Young said. He looked directly into his phone's camera. Well, followers, you wanted something special today. How about watching me buy an entire alien ice crystal shop because the owner thought I didn't understand value? The message feed exploded with excited comments. People couldn't believe what they were watching. Some called him crazy, others called him a legend. The view count was climbing faster than ever before. Process it, Du Young said, holding out his credit stick. Thal took the stick with his long fingers and connected it to his system. Numbers flashed across the screens. There was a soft chime, and then a louder one. The transaction was complete. "Congratulations," Kithel said, his voice carrying a strange mix of emotions. "You are now the owner of the finest ice crystal collection in this sector of space." He paused, then added with what might have been a slight smile. "And of course, that includes all the environmental systems necessary to maintain the collection." "Environmental systems?" Taiho asked just as a loud humming filled the shop. The temperature, which had been cold but manageable, suddenly dropped dramatically. Their environmental suits kicked into high gear, trying to keep them warm. Frost began forming on the outside of their visors. "Of course," Kithel said, seeming completely comfortable as the temperature plummeted. "These specimens must be kept at exactly -50°C to maintain their structure. As the new owner, you now control those systems. Though I should mention that the controls are calibrated for Shaqarian touch sensors, which operate quite differently from human ones." Do Young's triumphant smile froze on his face, much like the layer of ice now coating his expensive suit. His millions of followers watched as he stood there, suddenly realizing that perhaps he should have asked a few more questions before making his purchase. "Don't worry," Kithel said, and this time there was definitely a smile in his voice. "I'm sure you understand the value of learning new skills. Shall I begin explaining how to operate a Shaqarian temperature control system? It should only take a few weeks to master the basics." The comments from his followers were now a mix of laughter and concern. Du Young looked at his friends, who were huddled together for warmth despite their suits' best efforts. He looked at his new shop, full of priceless ice crystals that needed to be kept at temperatures that would freeze a human solid in minutes. He looked at Kethel, who seemed to be enjoying this moment far more than any proper business owner should. And then, despite everything, Du Young started to laugh. It wasn't the polite laugh he used at his father's business parties, or the camera-ready laugh he used for his followers. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes when you realize you've done something both incredibly stupid and incredibly amazing at the same time. "Well," he said to his phone, his breath visible in the freezing air, "I guess this is going to be more interesting than I planned. Stay tuned, everyone. Your favorite social media star just became the youngest human owner of a high-end alien ice crystal shop." He turned to Kithel, still smiling despite the cold. "I hope you're ready to teach me everything you know about ice crystals, because I'm not going anywhere." Kithel's 4 eyes blinked again, but this time with what looked like genuine surprise. Perhaps this human youngling understood more about value than he had thought. After all, true value wasn't just in knowing the price of things, but in being willing to learn their worth. "Very well, young owner," Kithel said. "Your first lesson begins now. Shall we start with how to prevent your new investment from melting?" The next hour in Kithel's shop, no, Du Young's shop now, was a crash course in alien ice crystal maintenance. The temperature remained at a bone-chilling -50°C as Kethel showed Du Young the basics of running the store. Tai Ho and Jai Yun had retreated to the shop's entrance where it was slightly warmer, but they kept watching and recording everything on their phones. "These controls," Kithel explained, pointing to what looked like a block of ice with swirling patterns inside it, respond to specific body temperatures. Shaqarian hands are naturally cold enough to activate them. Human hands." He paused, watching Du Young's gloved hand pass harmlessly over the surface, "are far too warm." Du Young's environmental suit was working hard to keep him from freezing, but even its advanced technology wasn't designed for prolonged exposure to such extreme cold. Small ice crystals were forming on his eyebrows, and his breath came out in thick white clouds. "There must be a way to adjust it," Du Young said, trying to keep his teeth from chattering. His live stream was still going, and the viewer count had reached record numbers. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. "What about using some kind of cooling device?" "Possibly," Kithel admitted, "but it would need to be precisely calibrated. Too cold, and you might damage the controls." Too warm, and nothing will happen. The alien merchant moved his own hand over the control panel, and the patterns inside shifted slightly. Each pattern represents a different system. Temperature, humidity, pressure. All must be perfectly balanced. Suddenly, Du Young's phone chimed with an incoming call. The name that appeared made him freeze more completely than the cold air ever could. Dad. His followers sent message after message, urging him to answer. Some were betting on how angry Hejun Park would be when he found out his son had spent 15 million credits on an ice crystal shop. Others were defending Du Young, saying it was a smart business move. Taking a deep breath of frigid air, Du Young answered the call. His father's hologram appeared, floating in the cold space between him and Cathal. Son, Hejun Park said calmly, too calmly. I just received a rather interesting notification from our family's accounting system. Would you like to explain why you spent 15 million credits at? He seemed to peer at something off-screen. Cathal's rare ice treasures. Dad, I can explain. Du Young started, but his father held up a hand. Oh, I know you can explain. Your explanation is being broadcast live to millions of people right now. Hejun's hologram turned slightly to look at Cathal. You must be Cathal. I understand you just sold your shop to my son. Indeed, Mr. Park, Cathal said respectfully. Your son made a very decisive purchase. I see. Hejun turned back to Du Young. And did my son happen to research proper storage temperatures for Centaurian frost gems before making this decisive purchase? Du Young felt his face grow hot despite the cold. Well, not exactly, but. Or did he investigate the legal requirements for operating a specialized import business on a space station? I was going to look into. Or perhaps, Hejun continued, his voice still eerily calm. He considered the cost of maintaining a stock of extremely rare and environmentally sensitive artifacts. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the environmental systems and the quiet ding of incoming viewer messages. Du Young looked at his feet, where a thin layer of frost had formed on his boots. But then he straightened up and looked directly at his father's hologram. No, I didn't research any of that. I made an impulse decision because Cathal didn't think I understood value. He gestured at the beautiful ice crystals around him. But I do understand value, Dad. You taught me that value isn't just about money. It's about potential. These crystals are amazing. And yes, I need to learn how to take care of them properly, but I can do it. Hejun was quiet for a long moment. Thal watched the exchange with all four eyes, his expression unreadable. Finally, Hejun spoke again. Thal, he said, what would you say is the most valuable thing in your, excuse me, my son's shop right now? Thal moved to one of the display cases and pointed to a crystal that seemed to dance with internal light. This piece took 3 centuries to form in the heart of a comet. It's worth at least 2 million credits alone. Interesting, Hejun said. Du Young, what would you say is the most valuable thing in your new shop? Du Young looked around. His eyes passed over the rare crystals, the ancient ice sculptures, and the expensive equipment. Then they settled on Cathal, who was still standing perfectly comfortable in the extreme cold, who knew every crystal's history and how to care for them. Knowledge, Du Young said firmly. The most valuable thing here is Cathal's knowledge about all of this. The crystals are beautiful and rare, but without knowing how to take care of them, they're worthless. A small smile appeared on Hejun's face. Now that, he said, is understanding value. He turned to Cathal again. Would you be interested in remaining at the shop as an advisor? My son clearly needs to learn a great deal, and quickly, if he's going to make this investment work. Cathal's skin patterns shifted slightly, perhaps the Shaqarian equivalent of raised eyebrows. You're not going to reverse the purchase. No, Hejun said. My son made a decision. It was impulsive and poorly researched, but he's right about one thing. There's potential here. Besides, and now he was definitely smiling, when I was his age, I bought an entire asteroid because someone said I couldn't afford it. Turned out to be full of rare earth elements. Sometimes the best opportunities come from impulse decisions, as long as you're willing to work hard afterward. The tension in the room seemed to decrease slightly, though the temperature definitely didn't. Du Young's followers were going crazy with messages of support and excitement. Well then, Huffle said, looking at Du Young with new respect, perhaps we should begin with a proper inventory of your purchase. You'll need to know exactly what you own if you're going to be a proper merchant. Yes, Du Young agreed quickly. But first, can we please figure out how to adjust these environmental controls? My suit's warning that it's reaching its cold tolerance limits. Actually, Jai Yun called from near the entrance, where she and Taeho were still watching. That might be our first business opportunity. She held up her phone, showing a message from one of Du Young's followers. Someone's offering to help design custom environmental suits for the shop. They work for a company that makes deep space exploration gear. See, Du Young said to his father's hologram. Opportunities already. Hejun shook his head, but he was still smiling. I'll have our legal team start working on the proper permits and licenses you'll need. Kifal, please make sure my son doesn't accidentally freeze himself while learning about ice crystal maintenance. Of course, Mr. Park, Kifal agreed. Though I must say, your son has already shown more dedication than many would in his position. Most humans would have run from the cold by now. Running away isn't really our family style, Hejun said. Du Young, we'll talk more about this later. Try not to buy any more shops before dinner. With that, his hologram disappeared. Du Young let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It came out as a small cloud of ice crystals in the frigid air. That went better than I expected. Indeed, Kifl said. Now shall we begin your education in earnest. Your first lesson will be in proper temperature maintenance for various types of ice crystals. I suggest you take notes. Wait, Taeho called from the entrance. How is he supposed to take notes? His phone screen is starting to freeze. Ah, Kifl said, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. That will be lesson 2. Proper equipment for working in extreme cold. But first, he moved to a storage compartment and pulled out what looked like a thick blanket made of shimmering material. This is a thermal wrap designed for transporting sensitive materials. It should help your suit maintain temperature for a few more hours. As Kathol helped Du Young wrap the thermal blanket around himself, the young human looked at his phone screen. His followers were still watching, sending messages of encouragement and suggestions for the shop. Some were already asking when they could visit and see the famous crystals that had cost so much. Kthal, Du Young said suddenly, what if we set up a proper viewing area, where people could safely see the crystals without having to come all the way into the cold section? Hithel's skin patterns shifted in what Du Young was beginning to recognize as interest. That could work. We could install transparent barriers that maintain the temperature difference. It would increase foot traffic without risking damage to the specimens. And we could sell tickets for people who want the full experience. Jai-yun added. You know, provide them with proper cold gear and give them a tour of the whole collection. See, Du Young said, grinning despite his chattering teeth. We're already thinking like proper merchants. He turned to his phone. What do you think, followers? Ready to visit the coldest shop on Grand Exchange Station? The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people eager to visit, to see the famous crystals, to experience the extreme cold. Some were already making travel plans to come to the station. Very well, Kifl said, his 4 eyes showing what might have been amusement. But before we plan any tours, you need to learn about the crystals themselves. Shall we start with the Centaurian frost gems? They have a fascinating formation process. As Kathol began his explanation, Du Young listened carefully, trying to ignore the cold that seeped through even the thermal wrap. He had wanted to prove he understood value, and now he had 15 million credits worth of ice crystals to take care of. But as he watched Keithel expertly handle a crystal that seemed to hold a frozen rainbow inside it, he realized something important. Understanding value wasn't just about knowing the price of things. It was about recognizing opportunities, being willing to learn, and not running away when things got difficult, or in this case, very, very cold. His followers watched as their favorite social media star began his unexpected new career as an ice crystal merchant, one chattering tooth at a time. A week had passed since Du Young's impulsive purchase of Keithel's ice crystal shop. The Grand Exchange Station's Commerce Authority had been busy processing all the paperwork for the change in ownership. During this time, Du Young spent every day learning from Keithel, even though the extreme cold still made his teeth chatter. On this particular morning, Du Young walked into his shop wearing a new environmental suit. It was different from the fashionable one he had worn before. This suit was bulkier but much better at handling the cold. The company that had reached out through his followers had delivered their first prototype, designed specially for the shop's temperature. Much better, Du Young said as he checked the suit's temperature readout. Only -5 degrees inside the suit, instead of -15 like before. Keithel stood nearby, checking the morning's crystal maintenance readings. Your new equipment seems more practical than fashionable. A wise choice for a merchant. I'm learning. Du Young smiled. He had gained a new respect for practical things over the past week. His followers had watched as he slowly transformed from a spoiled rich kid into something resembling a real businessman. His viewer count had actually gone up as people became interested in his journey. Tai Ho and Jai Yun entered the shop, also wearing the new suits. They had stuck with Du Young through the whole adventure, helping him plan and organize. The shop's entrance now had a special airlock system that helped manage the temperature change, another suggestion from his followers that had worked out well. The construction team is here, Jai Yun announced. They're ready to start building the viewing area we designed. Du Young nodded excitedly. They had spent days planning a way to make the shop more accessible to visitors. The new design would include a warm viewing gallery separated from the main shop by special transparent walls. This way, regular customers could see the crystals without having to deal with the extreme cold. Excellent, Keithel said. But first, young owner, you have your morning crystal maintenance to complete. Du Young walked carefully through the shop to the display case containing the Centaurian frost gems. These were the most valuable pieces in the collection, and they needed daily care to maintain their brilliance. He had learned that even a single degree of temperature change could affect their color. As he worked, he talked to his followers through the shop's new camera system. Good morning, everyone. Today we're starting the shop renovations. Soon you'll all be able to visit and see these amazing crystals in person. But first, let me show you how we take care of a Centaurian frost gem. Using the special tools Keithel had taught him to use, Du Young carefully cleaned the crystal's surface. His movements were slow and precise, very different from his usually energetic style. His followers watched as he explained each step, just as Keithel had explained it to them. The patterns inside the crystal are actually frozen gas streams, he explained, remembering his lessons. They formed over hundreds of years in the upper atmosphere of Alpha Centauri b. Each color represents a different type of gas, frozen at exactly the right moment to create these beautiful shapes. Keithel watched from nearby, his 4 eyes showing approval. The young human had learned quickly, taking his new responsibility seriously. The Shaqarian merchant had been surprised by this change, but pleasantly so. Suddenly, the shop's alert system started blinking. Red lights flashed, and a soft alarm sounded. Keithel rushed to the control panel, his skin patterns shifting rapidly. The main cooling system is malfunctioning, he announced, his long fingers moving quickly over the controls. Temperature is rising. Du Young's heart started beating faster, but he remembered his training. How long do we have before it gets too warm for the crystals? 20 minutes at most, Keithel said. The backup system is engaging, but it can only handle half the shop's area. Right, Du Young said, thinking quickly. His followers watched tensely as he made decisions. Tahoe, help K-Thul check the system controls. Jai-yun, contact the station's emergency maintenance team. I'll start moving the most sensitive crystals to the backup system's coverage area. Everyone moved quickly. Do-young carefully picked up the Centaurian frost gem he had been cleaning, using his insulated gloves. Other crystals would have to be moved too, but these were the most valuable and the most sensitive to temperature changes. Be very careful, Phil warned as he worked on the controls. The slightest shock could damage them permanently. Do-young walked as smoothly as he could, holding the precious crystal. The temperature in the shop was rising slowly but steadily. His suit's display showed that it was now only -40 degrees instead of the usual -50. This might not seem like a big difference to humans, but for these crystals, it could be disastrous. His followers sent message after message of encouragement and suggestions. Some were worried, others excited by the drama. But Do-young ignored his phone for once, focusing entirely on saving his investment. Jai-yun's voice came through his suit's communication system. Emergency team says they'll be here in 15 minutes. That's too long, Kvil said. The temperature will be too high by then. Do-young had just placed the first crystal in the safe zone when he had an idea. The thermal wraps, he said. The ones we use for transport. They can maintain temperature for a few hours, right? Yes, Kvil confirmed, understanding immediately. In the storage room, third shelf from the right. Tahoe, grab them. Do-young ordered as he carefully picked up another crystal. We can wrap the crystals we can't move to the backup systems area. The next 10 minutes were intense. Do-young and his friends worked quickly but carefully, moving what they could and wrapping what they couldn't. Fall continued working on the controls, trying to squeeze every bit of cooling power from the backup system. The temperature kept rising. -35 degrees. -30. Do-young's hands shook slightly as he wrapped a particularly delicate ice sculpture, but he forced himself to stay steady. All those hours of practice and lessons with K-Thul were paying off now. Just as they finished securing the last crystal, the emergency maintenance team arrived. They quickly found the problem. A power coupling had failed in the main cooling system. It took them another 20 minutes to fix it, during which time Do-young and his friends watched anxiously as the temperature slowly returned to normal. Finally, Kvil announced, temperature stabilizing at -50 degrees, all systems returning to normal. Do-young let out a long breath, which froze instantly in the cold air. He looked around at his shop, at the crystals they had moved and wrapped, at his friends in their bulky suits, at K-Thul, who was looking at him with what seemed like pride. Well, he said to his phone, remembering his followers, I guess that's what they mean by hands-on business experience. He laughed, and this time it wasn't the nervous laugh of someone trying to look confident. It was the laugh of someone who had faced a real challenge and handled it well. You did well, Kvil said. Many would have panicked. You stayed calm and made good decisions. I had a good teacher, Do-young replied. Then he turned to his phone again. So, followers, who wants to see us unwrap these crystals and check if they're all okay? K-Thul can explain what we're looking for. The next hour was spent carefully unwrapping and checking each crystal. To everyone's relief, there was no damage. Do-young's quick thinking and careful handling had protected his investment. His followers watched and learned along with him as K-Thul explained how to check for signs of temperature stress in different types of crystals. As they worked, the construction team waited patiently in the warm entrance area. They would start work on the viewing gallery soon, but for now, they watched with interest as the young human owner and his Shaqarian advisor worked together to care for their unique collection. You know, Tahoe said as they finished checking the last crystal, a week ago you bought this shop to prove you understood value. I think today you really proved it. Do-young looked at his friend, then at the crystal in his hands. Its frozen patterns seemed to shine more brightly than ever. No, he said thoughtfully. A week ago I thought I understood value because I could afford to buy expensive things. Today I proved I understood value because I knew how to protect them. Thal's skin patterns shifted in what Du Young had learned was the Shakarian equivalent of a smile. Perhaps, the alien merchant said, "You understand more than just value now." 1 month had passed since Du Young had bought the ice crystal shop. The Grand Exchange Station hummed with activity as usual, but something was different about the section where his shop stood. A long line of people waited outside, all excited to see what had become known as the human icicle, the coldest shop run by a human in the galaxy. Du Young stood in the newly built viewing gallery, watching as visitors pressed their faces against the special thermal glass. On the other side of the glass, in the freezing main shop area, Thal was giving a tour to a small group wearing the shop's custom environmental suits. These tours had become very popular, especially after the story of how they had saved the crystals during the cooling system crisis went viral. The viewing gallery was a great idea, Tahoe said, standing next to Du Young. The warm gallery let regular visitors see the crystals without having to deal with the extreme cold. Special lights made the crystals sparkle beautifully, creating rainbow patterns on the walls. "Look at this," Jia Yun called from her spot at the payment counter. She held up her tablet. "We've made back almost half of your initial investment already. The tours are sold out for the next 3 months." Du Young smiled, remembering how this had all started. He had bought the shop to prove a point, but it had turned into something much more important. His social media followers had watched his entire journey, from clueless rich kid to respected merchant. His channel wasn't just about showing off expensive things anymore. People came to learn about the crystals and their amazing stories. The shop's entrance doors opened, and Du Young's father walked in. Jun Park looked around the viewing gallery with obvious approval. The place had changed a lot in the past month. Professional information displays told visitors about each type of crystal. Beautiful holographic signs explained the science behind their formation. Everything looked polished and professional. "Impressive," Jun said, walking up to his son. "Very impressive indeed." "Thanks, Dad," Du Young replied. "But you should see the new storage system we installed. Thal designed it specially for." "Actually," his father interrupted with a smile, "that's part of why I'm here. Thal contacted me yesterday with an interesting proposal." Du Young's heart skipped a beat. Was Thal planning to leave? The Shakarian merchant had become not just a teacher, but a friend over the past month. The shop wouldn't be the same without him. "Don't look so worried," Jun laughed. "Thal suggested we might want to expand the business. It seems there are other rare materials that need special cold storage. He thinks we could open similar shops on other stations." "Really?" Du Young's eyes widened. "But that would cost a lot more than 15 million credits." "It would," his father agreed. "Which is why I'm offering to make it a joint investment between Park Quantum Systems and your shop. That is, if you're interested in becoming part of a larger business venture." Before Du Young could answer, Thal's tour group returned to the warm gallery. The visitors were talking excitedly about what they had seen, their faces red from the cold despite the protective suits. Thal followed them out, his skin patterns showing satisfaction at their enthusiasm. "Ah, Mr. Park," Thal said when he saw Du Young's father. "I trust you received my proposal." "I did," Jun replied. "I was just discussing it with my son. Though I notice you didn't mention one detail in your message. Why did you suggest this expansion now?" Thal's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Because your son has proven himself worthy of trust. When he first bought this shop, I thought he was just another rich human trying to prove something. But he has shown dedication, intelligence, and most importantly, respect for these treasures we protect." Du Young felt his face grow warm at the praise. "I had a good teacher," he said. "No," Thal corrected him. "You had the right attitude to learn. There is a difference." The alien merchant turned to Jun. "A month ago, your son made an impulsive purchase to prove he understood value. Now, he truly does understand it. Not just the value of credits, but the value of knowledge, of hard work, and of treating precious things with care." Jun nodded slowly. And that's why you think he's ready to help manage a larger operation. Precisely, Kifl said, though he will need to learn much more about business management, and perhaps invest in warmer suits for the new locations we have in mind. Some of them are even colder than this shop. Do-young laughed. Even colder? I thought -50 was bad enough. But his mind was already racing with possibilities. They could create a whole network of specialized storage facilities. Each location could have its own unique collection of rare materials. His followers would love seeing new places, learning about new treasures. Well, his father asked, "Are you interested?" Do-young looked around his shop, at the visitors pressing their faces against the thermal glass, at his friends who had helped him through everything, at Kefil who had taught him so much, at the beautiful crystals that had changed his life in unexpected ways. "Yes," he said firmly, "but I have one condition." His father raised an eyebrow. "Oh, we keep this shop exactly as it is," Do-young said. "It stays special. It's where everything started. The other locations can be bigger or fancier, but this one stays like this, where a spoiled rich kid learned what value really means." Kval's skin patterns shifted in what Do-young now knew was definitely a smile. Hajun laughed and put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Done," his father said, "though you're not that spoiled rich kid anymore. You're a businessman now, one who happens to own the most popular ice crystal shop in the sector." Speaking of business, Jai-yun called from the counter. "The next tour group is ready. They're very excited to meet the famous Do-young Park, the human who bought an alien ice shop on a dare and turned it into a success." Do-young grinned and picked up his environmental suit. It didn't feel so bulky anymore. He had gotten used to it, just like he had gotten used to the cold, the responsibility, and the hard work. "Well then," he said to his phone, which was still streaming to his millions of followers, "who wants to see our newest addition to the collection?" Kifl just got in a crystal that formed in the tail of a comet. But first, let me tell you the amazing story of how it was discovered. As Do-young led the excited tour group into the freezing shop, he caught his reflection in one of the crystal displays. He looked different from the teenage show-off who had walked in here a month ago. His eyes were more focused, his smile more genuine. He had set out to prove he understood value, but he had ended up learning something much more important: the value of proving himself worthy of trust. Kval watched his young human partner with pride. Sometimes the most precious things, like wisdom and maturity, could only form under pressure, just like the crystals they protected. And sometimes, the most valuable discoveries happened by accident, when someone was brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to take a chance on something new. The shop's temperature stayed steady at -50 degrees Celsius, but inside his protective suit, Do-young felt warm with satisfaction. He had found his place in the galaxy, even if it was in the coldest shop on Grand Exchange Station, and he wouldn't have it any other way.